Every afternoon at precisely 3:15 p.m., Walter Hayes walked through the rusty gates of Lincoln Park in downtown Cleveland, Ohio. At 73 years old, Walter was a figure of quiet consistency, tall and lean, with silver hair combed neatly to one side, wearing the same brown leather jacket over a flannel shirt, carrying a thermos of coffee and yesterday's newspaper folded under his arm. The neighborhood children watched him from playground swings and jungle gyms, whispering questions their parents couldn't answer. Why does that old man come here? 8-year-old Mia Rodriguez asked her mother one Tuesday, pointing toward the weathered park bench where Walter sat alone, scanning faces while pretending to read his paper. He doesn't have kids. He doesn't feed the pigeons. He just watches. Walter's daily presence had become as predictable as the school bell, yet no one in the working-class neighborhood knew anything about him. He never spoke to the children, never approached the families, never even smiled. He simply arrived, sat on his bench facing the playground, and stayed until exactly 5:30 p.m., when the park began to empty. Then he'd fold his newspaper, cap his thermos, and walk home to whatever life existed beyond those rusted gates. The mystery of Walter Hayes had persisted for 8 months, creating an undercurrent of curiosity that rippled through afternoon conversations between mothers pushing strollers and fathers coaching Little League on weekends. Walter's routine was more deliberate than anyone realized. Each afternoon, he positioned himself with a clear view of the playground's entrance, the basketball courts, and the walking path that connected Lincoln Park to Jefferson Elementary School 6 blocks away. His weathered hands, marked by decades of manual labor, held his coffee steady while his pale blue eyes tracked movement with the precision of someone trained to notice details others missed. To the families gathered in the park, Walter appeared to be just another lonely retiree killing time. But Walter was working, maintaining a silent watch over a community that didn't know it needed protection. His presence wasn't coincidental. It was calculated, purposeful, born from a past that haunted him and a promise he'd made to himself after retiring from 35 years as a Cleveland police detective. Walter had moved to this neighborhood specifically for Lincoln Park, not for the fresh air or community atmosphere, but because crime statistics showed it was a convergence point for drug dealers targeting kids walking home from school. His modest pension allowed him to rent a small apartment 3 blocks away, close enough to maintain his vigil, far enough to remain anonymous. Most afternoons passed peacefully. Walter would watch children play, mothers chat, teenagers shoot hoops, but he also watched for the subtle signs of trouble. Unfamiliar adults lingering near school-age children, vehicles that circled the block repeatedly, teenagers displaying the nervous energy that preceded bad decisions. When necessary, Walter intervened, not with badge and authority, but with the quiet presence of someone who refused to look away. On a gray October afternoon, Walter noticed Marcus Thompson, a lanky 14-year-old with intelligent eyes and a guarded expression, sitting alone on the far end of his usual bench. Marcus had been walking through the park after school for weeks, always alone, always hurried. Today, he wasn't moving. Walter observed from his position 50 feet away as 2 older teenagers approached Marcus, Kyle and Danny, local dropouts Walter recognized from previous encounters with patrol officers. The conversation appeared casual to passing adults, but Walter's trained eye caught the body language of intimidation. Kyle, standing too close, Danny blocking Marcus's exit path, both boys' postures aggressive despite their casual tone. Marcus kept shaking his head, but Kyle persisted, eventually pulling something small from his jacket pocket. A baggie Walter couldn't identify from his distance, but could certainly imagine. When Marcus stood to leave, Danny stepped directly in front of him, and Kyle grabbed the boy's backpack strap. Walter closed his newspaper and walked over. "Afternoon," he said simply, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Beautiful day for the park." Kyle and Danny exchanged glances, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "Yeah, old man, real nice," Kyle muttered, releasing Marcus's backpack but not stepping aside. Walter sat down next to Marcus on the bench, spreading his newspaper across his lap and unscrewing his thermos cap. "Mind if I sit here, son? My usual spot's got too much sun today." The casual intervention worked exactly as Walter hoped. Kyle and Danny, deprived of privacy for their recruitment pitch, muttered excuses and walked away. Marcus remained frozen, clearly shaken by whatever had just been proposed. "You okay?" Walter asked quietly, not looking at Marcus directly, but offering the question to the air between them. Marcus nodded quickly, then reconsidered. "I think so. I mean, yeah, those guys are just..." "Trouble," Walter finished. "I know. Been watching them work this park for months." Marcus turned to study Walter's profile. "You've been watching?" "Every day." Walter poured coffee into his thermos cap and offered it to Marcus, who shook his head. "Used to be a cop. Can't quite turn it off, I guess." "A cop?" Marcus's voice carried surprise and wariness. "Like, retired?" 35 years. Detective, mostly." Walter took a sip of his coffee and continued scanning the park. "Saw a lot of kids get approached by guys like Kyle and Danny. Saw what happened to the ones who said yes." They sat in comfortable silence while children played on swings nearby and mothers chatted on neighboring benches. Finally, Marcus asked, "What were they trying to sell me?" "Probably weed, maybe pills. Doesn't matter much. They start small, build trust, then gradually increase both product and expectations." Walter folded his newspaper. "How they get you hooked isn't just on drugs, son. They get you hooked on feeling important, feeling included. Then one day you're running bigger risks for bigger money, and by then it's hard to remember how it started." Marcus absorbed this information. "Why do you care?" "I mean, about kids you don't even know?" Walter was quiet for a long moment. "Lost my grandson to this stuff. Different city, different dealers, same story. He was about your age when it started." He paused. "Figured maybe I could help make sure it doesn't happen to someone else's grandson." Over the following weeks, Marcus began stopping by Walter's bench after school. Their conversations revealed that Walter's presence in Lincoln Park wasn't as invisible as he'd believed. Marcus had noticed him months ago, as had several other regular park visitors. More importantly, Marcus lived with his grandmother, Rosa Thompson, a community activist who had been quietly coordinating with neighbors to address the growing drug problem around Jefferson Elementary. "My grandma's been trying to get parents organized," Marcus explained one afternoon. "She says the police don't have time for small-time dealers, and by the time anyone calls, the kids are already involved." Walter smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from him. "Your grandmother sounds like someone I should meet." The introduction led to Walter learning about an informal network of parents, grandparents, and long-time residents who had been monitoring the neighborhood's safety with varying degrees of success. Rosa Thompson had been documenting incidents. Mrs. Chen from the corner store had been noting suspicious vehicles, and Mr. Williams, who walked his dog at dawn, had been tracking overnight activity around the school. What they lacked was experience in recognizing the subtle patterns of criminal behavior and the confidence to intervene effectively. Walter's 35 years of police work provided exactly the expertise the community needed, while their established relationships and local knowledge gave Walter the connections his solitary vigil had been missing. Within a month, Walter's role in the community had quietly transformed. He still maintained his daily bench vigil, but now he was part of a coordinated effort. Rosa Thompson introduced him to parents at school pickup. Mrs. Chen included him in informal neighborhood watch discussions, and Mr. Williams began timing his dog walks to coincide with Walter's evening departure from the park. The children, initially wary of the silent old man, gradually began acknowledging him with shy waves and eventual greetings. Marcus served as an unofficial ambassador, explaining to classmates that Walter was keeping an eye on things and could be trusted if anyone felt unsafe walking home. Walter's approach remained low-key and respectful. He never challenged young people directly unless immediate intervention was necessary. Instead, he shared information with parents and helped coordinate adult responses to concerning behavior. When Kyle and Danny recruited a 12-year-old to carry packages, Walter provided detailed observations that helped the boy's father understand the situation and intervene before it escalated. The most significant change was in Marcus himself. The intelligent, guarded teenager had found in Walter both a mentor and a friend. Their afternoon conversations ranged from school stress to career planning, from neighborhood gossip to life lessons drawn from Walter's decades of experience. On a cold November evening, Walter's months of vigilance proved their worth in ways he hadn't expected. Marcus had stayed late at school for tutoring and was walking home alone just as darkness fell. Walter, maintaining his usual schedule, was packing up his thermos when he saw 3 older teenagers, not the usual Kyle and Danny, but more serious players Walter had been monitoring, approach Marcus near the park's entrance. This time, the body language wasn't about recruitment. It was about retribution. Word had spread that Marcus had been talking to some old cop and interfering with business around Jefferson Elementary. The confrontation quickly escalated beyond intimidation when one of the teenagers shoved Marcus and demanded to know what he'd told police. Walter moved faster than his 73 years should have allowed, but more importantly, he wasn't alone. Rosa Thompson was walking home from the community center. Mrs. Chen was closing her store. Mr. Williams was returning from his evening dog walk. The informal network Walter had become part of mobilized instantly. "Marcus!" Rosa called out, her voice carrying the authority of a grandmother who wouldn't tolerate threats in her neighborhood. The combination of multiple adult witnesses and Walter's calm but unmistakable police presence diffused the situation quickly. The older teenagers, realizing they were outnumbered and exposed, retreated with muttered threats that everyone present understood were empty. That night, Marcus's near confrontation became the catalyst for the community to formally acknowledge what had been building for months. Rosa Thompson organized a neighborhood meeting where Walter's role was openly discussed and officially welcomed. Parents who had wondered about the old man in the park learned about his background and his quiet contributions to their children's safety. "We never asked you to do this," Rosa said during the meeting. "But we're grateful you chose to care about our kids anyway." Walter, uncomfortable with attention but touched by the community's acceptance, tried to deflect credit. "I just sit on a bench and watch. You all are the ones who make this neighborhood safe." But the assembled parents understood something Walter was too modest to claim. His presence had changed the dynamic of their community. Drug dealers had moved their operations to locations with less consistent adult supervision. Children walked with more confidence, knowing trusted adults were watching. Parents felt supported in their efforts to protect their families. Most importantly, Walter's example had inspired others to pay closer attention, speak up when necessary, and invest in the community's well-being rather than assuming someone else would handle problems. Winter brought changes to Lincoln Park, but Walter's routine remained constant. Now, however, his bench was occasionally shared by Rosa Thompson during her walks, Mrs. Chen during her afternoon breaks, or Mr. Williams when his arthritis needed rest. The solitary vigil had become a community effort. Marcus, thriving academically and socially, had become a bridge between Walter and the younger children who still found the old detective intimidating. He helped Walter understand teenage concerns while reassuring his classmates that the old man genuinely cared about their welfare. The informal neighborhood watch had evolved into a structured program with regular meetings, shared responsibilities, and direct communication with local pull